Welcome everybody to VANTEC. It's Wednesday afternoon, so I must be in Vancouver. Why am I saying such a thing? Because forgive me if I'm not as lucid as I usually am because I'm still jet lagged. It's now I think 3 a.m. in Istanbul. This is where I was. Okay, well, I'm glad to be back here in Vancouver. It's sunny here and it's great weather, and we've got a really interesting lineup today. So we've been operating for 23 years. I just did the calculation here, and we've been meeting every single month since 1999. And I'm really happy to say that we're going strong, and we've changed VANTEC quite a bit and evolved to suit everybody. And I thank the whole community for helping us be better, really up our game. And we have VANTEC meetings every single month. And this month is a themed month for Cleantech. And to kick things off for themed events, we always have a little presentation about the topic of the month. And for this, I am going to hand it over to my good friend and colleague, Dave Thomas, who's with SFU Venture Labs, and he and I are also partners at Rocket Builders. So Dave, take it away.
Thank you very much, Thazal. I'm going to share my screen, if that's okay with everybody. And I'm going to put up a presentation. Let's go. All right. So the topic this time around is Cleantech, and it's a certain version of Cleantech. Obviously, it's talking about investing in Cleantech and the transition to circularity and carbon neutrality. So a lot of it is about the circular economy and a number of other things. Before I get going, Thazal mentioned earlier on that VANTEC has been running since 1999. And I see Alan Burgess in the audience, and Alan and I were with the company where he was the CEO, and he presented in 1999 at the VANTEC Angel Network. So it's nice to see him come back 23 years later. Anyways, what I'd like to do is I'm doing the presenting. Jeff Hansen is also on board from Rocket Builders. And we've got a number of different topics that we wanted to talk about. One quick thing we wanted to do is just mention what Venture Labs has running at the moment, a little bit of self-promotion. One event that people might find interesting is an event called How to Work with Multinational Corporations, featuring SAP, Amazon Web Services, Microsoft, and CGI. Full details are available on the Venture Labs website. It's April 25th, starting at 4 p.m. Also have a number of other good seminars and workshops put on by Garibaldi Capital, including as SaaS metrics for maximizing valuation and best practices for accounting for a SaaS business. Those are in April and May. So our agenda today is really not to try to be comprehensive and go through a whole bunch of data. The objective is really to take a look at some of the latest and very latest comments and predictions and some of the questions from the technology news sources. I've got something here, which is from about 4 or 5 days ago. Evoke, which is a local venture capital firm or a local angel sort of syndicating firm, has raised $150 million for Cleantech, and they did that relatively recently. And Jonathan Rohn was just telling me about something that was announced earlier on today and yesterday. So there's a lot of interesting news, and a lot of it is very, very recent. Our climate, our schedule agenda will be climate tech, just in general. And then we'll drop into energy storage, who's storing energy or will be storing energy, what's the future for hydrogen, different types of it and why. Then we'll take a look at, if we're taking so much of a change in the value chains, how does this impact a lot of the things which are either still in the ground or water? And finally, we'll look at ESG, because this is something that's an important factor in it, and something that's decreasing, we'll call it the cycle of how long it takes for clean tech investments to mature and to succeed. So let's brief thing comment is, and this is from Entrepreneur.com, March 2022. The industry has matured, and like the bubble that prevailed at the beginning of this century, like 20 years ago, clean tech companies seem poised for scale and long-term growth. In a report from McKinsey, they say that there will be 140 billion plus in annual investments by 2025, and that's annually in electrification, agriculture, power grid, hydrogen, carbon capture. You could add in sequestration, storage, all sorts of portions of a very broad clean tech market are receiving investments. And a lot of them are infrastructure related, but a lot of them are also still relatively early stage opportunities. So when I look at this, and interesting stats from PwC, in the last 8 years, there was 222 billion in climate change investments. And then in the second half of 2020 and the first half of 2021, which is a 12-month period, it was 87.5 billion, or 39 or almost 40% of the investment in 8 years happened in 1 year. So the rate of change and the volume of money going into trying to change or create new types of energy or new types of technology to improve climate change or to counteract climate change is quite large. So what you get is a 210% jump in funding from the prior 12-month period. And interestingly, 65% is from US investors. And this represents 14% of all venture capital investment. So it's not a small part of the venture capital industry, it's a very big part. So I've got a number of tables that I've borrowed from some of the reports that are relatively recent. This one is from January, it's from Holon IQ. And what it really looks at is different locations, whether it's China, United States, Europe, different places. What's the level of funding now and versus before the pandemic? So interestingly enough, we know that the pandemic was tough on clean tech companies, early stage ones, especially for revenue, because you couldn't go out and sell as much and it was difficult to do installations of things. It's very clear in 2020 and 2021 that there is a significant increase in investment into climate tech ventures. So it indicates very clearly that there's an interest and an appetite in this space. So, and everybody goes, well, is that the same all across the board? And if you look at 3 areas that are quite, heavily invested in over a period of time, and you go with education technology, climate technology, and digital health, one would have anticipated during the pandemic that digital health would really take off, but it's also very clear that climate technology has really had a significant increase at the same time. So over a 10-year period, it's increased 50%. So its rate of change is extremely high. And again, this comes from Holon IQ. So it gives us a real idea of how things are changing and how things are maturing in the marketplace. Another thing that we'll look at as final slide from this group is looking at it by region and also by deal size. So if you look at climate, which is the middle bar of the 3, the United States is by far the leading area, 54%. You also see that large plays, which is over $100 million or 65% of the investment. They're not all of it. So it tells you that a lot of money is going into infrastructure or will go into infrastructure in the future. So there is a significant change in the way, whether it's energy, whether it's all sorts of different types of technologies are going into changing climate or trying to reduce the impact of climate change as we know it now. So one way to look here is, will there be a lot of energy storage in the next 5 years? So you look at this graph and it's from 2020 through 2026. You see a very significant increase in the amount of energy storage. But the thing that's important here is in the past, a lot of energy storage was pumping water uphill into a reservoir when demand was light, and then you could actually use the reservoir to run turbines to increase energy capacity when you had high demand. A lot of it is going into lithium ion or other forms of energy storage. So it isn't necessarily all hydro anymore. It's moving into a whole variety of different types of energy storage capacity. And when we dig into that one a little bit more, we see that you can be putting energy storage in a residential. So if I had solar panels on my house, I could have batteries, or I could have a Tesla Powerwall in my basement. I could be storing energy myself, or it could go into commercial and industrial. But the real group that is significantly investing here is the utilities. In other words, they are trying to create energy storage capacity as a way of improving their ability to react to demand on the grid. And they're doing this through new technologies. And the graph looks almost linear in terms of increase, but when you look at the number of gigawatts hours of energy that will be deployed in the, call it the utility sector over the next 5 years, is very significant. So another way of thinking of it is, our battery is going to be there for all sorts of things. So here's a graph that talks about when solar installations go in, will batteries be with them? And this is saying very clearly that by 2024, 60%, and that percentage will even go higher, of utilities that are building large solar farms will also have very significant energy storage based on batteries. The idea that residential and commercial and industrial will do it the same, clearly there's growth there, but it's very clear that the utility grade installation of alternate forms of energy and storage capacity are a big trend in the near future. So another way of looking at it here is, if I build a large scale 4-hour battery storage system, will the cost go down? So what's the price going to be for kilowatt hour to do that? Or what's the price for megawatt? And I have to apologize, I managed to cut the scale off the bottom of this slide. But the real message in this one is that over the last few years and into the foreseeable future, there is still an ability for the price or the cost to continue to decrease. And this cost decrease, it justifies installations currently as they get lower and lower in terms of cost. So switching away from battery and energy storage and a lot of the things that are traditional, let's talk about something which is more current or more close to what we know in Vancouver. Let's talk a little bit about hydrogen. We understand that the hydrogen economy is something that's talked about a great deal, but one of the realities is that it's still a really early marketplace. A lot of companies are interested in cutting their carbon footprint across their supply chain, and hydrogen-based fuel is set to become a reliable source of low to zero carbon energy. But at the same time, it's still really, really early. So if you look at the trajectory of solar and wind, hydrogen is significantly behind, but at the same time, there is investment in both because there's an understanding the two can be complementary and that it will really change as things move along. Final comment here is that 30 countries have a hydrogen roadmap and have committed public funding to hydrogen technologies. So that's something which is positive and something that we all understand. Some series of hydrogen predictions from Bloomberg, and these are from January, so 3 months ago. If you look at them, I bolded the ones that I think are most important. But number one, electrolyzer sales will quadruple, and China will be the largest market. The thing that's interesting, though, is that the current market for electrolyzers is about 500 million, so it's still relatively small. So even if it quadruples, the investment into electrolyzation is different than the current investment, for example, in storage capacity. But the ability to make electrolyzers more efficient and to reduce the energy cost of creating high value hydrogen is there in the marketplace. So prediction that there will be hydrogen projects, they'll lag a little bit. And that one of the things I find interesting is that net zero will drive hydrogen demand more than carbon pricing. So an interest in circular and an interest by large corporations, cities, municipalities, levels of government, and even individuals to get closer and closer to net zero is something that will drive things. And the final one is something which is quite important. And I'll look at number 7 and say, heavy industry will dominate clean hydrogen demand. So if you are trying to create or use hydrogen in your heavy industry, It means that the need to transport the hydrogen may not be that great. It's not like it's going to be at every single gas station right away. It means that large plants, which can then convert and use clean hydrogen, they're stable, they don't move around a lot. They will be a big part of the landscape as we go forward. And they will be some of the early adopters in terms of looking for clean hydrogen and really making sure that they're able to get the supply of hydrogen they need. Here we see the word blue hydrogen, and there's also green hydrogen. As we go along, we'll talk a little bit more about them. Just before we move on to that, you can see that this is a graph that talks about electrolyzer shipments, 2018 to 2022. Again, it's from Bloomberg. The thing that is very interesting is to show the rate of growth in 2022, and that an optimistic forecast for all of 2022 would be even 30% higher. In other words, the change or the rate of change is really quite impressive in this space. So green hydrogen, which is hydrogen from green plants, different than blue hydrogen, which comes usually from natural gas. So the part of Canada which is poised to be able to produce hydrogen immediately in large quantity is obviously Alberta, but it would be blue hydrogen because they have natural gas. Then when you look along the sort of graph at the bottom, you see in 2028 that Canada is one of the countries which would be creating more hydrogen from green hydrogen. In other words, it would be food waste such as plant oils, a variety of other things like that. Slowly but surely, many countries will develop that capability as they move along. And logically, the ones which are close to the equator, so Brazil, India, a lot of the others with a lot of farming, would fall into that in the early countries for that. So let's, again, I think we're all familiar with the hydrogen industry. Fuel cells are a big part of the tech industry here in British Columbia. One of the statements we hear repeatedly is that the availability of low carbon intensity hydrogen is something which is retarding or slowing down, pilot production and commercial development. We go back to the days of Ballard. You need very, very high purity hydrogen. So the hydrogen which was used in those days had to come from a special plant in Quebec. So in the North Shore of Vancouver, we know there's hydrogen, which is part of the methane plant that's there, but it's not quite at the level of, we'll call it purity, so that getting to the hydrogen that is used by all sorts of different equipment is different. One thing that is important for us to understand is that half of the country's active companies in the hydrogen industry are located in British Columbia, and the province will be a major player in the future of the hydrogen industry. If you look at a lot of the companies that are doing well, have raised money, are building product, a lot of them are sort of structured or in the hydrogen space. So we would anticipate British Columbia being a leader in terms of creating new technology in the hydrogen area. I just want to drop into water right now. Pick these up from a group called Techonomy, and this is from January 2022. There will be, and this is looking at water, and Jonathan's with us on the panel. He's obviously an expert in this space, but just a couple of statements as we go along. There'll be extreme decentralization is moving into your home. In other words, where people will take responsibility for water protection. They'll be storing rainwater, whatever they're doing, it's going to be decentralized. Exponential technologies are taking off, especially ones which allow the creation of water in low humidity environments. And there's a hydration revolution. In the United States, 60 million people don't drink the tap water in their home. This isn't just Flint, Michigan. There's a significant mistrust of tap water. So it's very clear that how we treat water and how it has to be sort of what is clean water is going to be different as we go forward. So some water trends that are important as we look at stuff. We will see remote and digital water management, and this will be all over the place. And this will be in drinking water setups. It'll be in wastewater, that's 0.2 and 0.3. And there will be a very significant amount of water reuse. In other words, we can't just dump stuff into the stream, whatever else. Water will be recycled, or if it is water that's used for industrial purposes, it'll be returned to the industrial purpose and used many times. PFAS is interesting. It's called perfluoroalkylated substances, which is synthetic chemicals. And these are the types of things that are all the stuff we buy at the home hardware store. You go down, and whether it's paint thinner or everything else, these are the chemicals that end up in the water system. And there will be a very strong interest in trying to remove them and make it easier. And finally, solar will be a big factor in desalination, something that is expected to be a trend over the next while. So final slide I've got here. And this is something which we are bringing in, is that everybody's ESG goals. In other words, Deloitte has a survey here saying CEOs want to put more effort into societal issues. In other words, they're going to reduce our carbon emissions. We're more about the environment, more about society. We want to make sure that we're keeping care of our companies, our people, and as much as 58% indicate they want businesses to change their practices. PwC also states that 91% of business leaders believe their company have to act responsibility on ESG issues. And Jeff, just before we started this, sent me a neat article, which was the AT&T ESG report. And it's 30 pages long. They measure about 10 or 15 different things in a dashboard. And they show how they're becoming more diverse, how they're responding to how much trash they put out, all sorts of different things. And they have huge metrics and scorecards to watch the company as it moves ahead. And we see initiatives like that as being a big part of the future as things go ahead. So that's everything I wanted to do here. And I think we're at about 20 minutes, if that's all right, Fazal. So I'm gonna stop sharing my screen. And I'd like to invite the other members of the panel to come and join us, if that's okay. So Molly, hi, how are you? Good to see you.
Very good. How are you?
Good. Let's see, who else have we got? Is Jonathan with us? Okay. Vivian Kahn. There's Jonathan. Okay, doke. Vivian Kahn from BDC is also going to join us today. I know she was here earlier on.
Oh, I'm here.
Oh, there you are. Okay.
Yeah.
That's super.
I can see you, so I don't know where I am on
That's
the
okay.
Brady
There you are.
Bunch
Now you're
layout
okay.
there.
Here we are,
Okay.
Hollywood Squares. We can
Hi,
see
Vivian.
everybody.
Hi, John.
Yeah, excellent. Okie doke. So I have a series of questions that I circulated to the panel in advance. And I think I just start off with one that's really straightforward and ask Vivian to go first and say, why was 2021 such a significant year for climate change investment?
Mm-hmm.
It's a big question. I feel like it wasn't just 1 year. It was, for me, it feels like it's been at least half a decade there. But I think, one thing is definitely that, in 2020, 2021, there were some really clear and really real signals that, and undeniable signals that climate change is wreaking havoc, not just on the environment, but on our economies and causing extensive economic damage. And this kind of urgency, I think, is finally really causing that chain reaction that we need to see throughout sort of our entire economy. So I think from that, you see more urgency from individuals, consumers putting on their companies. You mentioned that ESG data point from PwC, employees urging their employers to do more. So there's a big kind of rally happening, I think, to kind of reinforce that urgency. But I think more importantly, sort of from an investment standpoint, that urgency also kind of leads to buyers helping to kind of pave the way for some of these companies in their path to commercialization. So even if they're, a few years out, indication and signals from customers wanting to buy a particular technology or to implement and adopt particular technology also helps these technology companies go out and show investors that there is a pathway to this commercialization. I think there's also a lot of capital. We talked, you had that, I think it was 38 billion. I think it's tracking around 38, 40 billion last year. Another group that I get some data from is a group called Cleantech VC out of the Valley. And they track clean investment data showing about that same globally 40 billion in 2021 across about 600 deals. But a more important stat for me was that they tracked 70 new climate venture firms and funds that were announced in 2021. 70 new funds. That's significant, I think. And then I think on top of that is we're seeing, there is an exit landscape out there that, climate tech investors are seeing, and we can even put aside the SPACs environment, and we think about some of the more commercial and retail investors are becoming more interested in having some public equities that are actually aligned with their values and that are in electrification or in hydrogen. So I think all of those things, and maybe they weren't just in 2021, but I think there was accumulation of a lot of those things happening in 2021 that made it a pretty significant year.
Great. So you used one term which I really like, which is the idea of an exit landscape. So I think we'll try to come back to that topic as we move along. Jonathan, would you like to add to that? Is there anything else that you see as a significant thing?
I'm not sure I can add to Vivian's summary. I thought it was excellent, except maybe just to emphasize a few points. Those of us who've been in clean tech for a while certainly don't see it as a it may look like a blip and a significant increase, but it does feel as though the world of clean tech has been building towards this day. But I think one thought I'd like to leave with you is that decarbonization has become a market, and people are and large companies and governments are willing to pay lots and lots of money for decarbonization. So I just give you one data point locally. There's a reason why Carbon Engineering has done a deal with Oxy to build 70 direct air capture plants, 70 plants. It's tens of billions of dollars of investment to go into a very expensive process. Currently, the cost will come down, but to extract CO2 out of the air. The reason why is because there's a market for that. There's a market for decarbonization. There's a market for carbon offsets at the highest quality. And you can take that idea across virtually every sector, from mining to oil and gas, to pharmaceuticals and chemicals, power generation, transportation. Across virtually every sector, every sector is got plans to decarbonize because it makes business sense to do that. And certainly in the you talked a lot about ESG, Dave. Certainly what I'm seeing in the markets that I'm working in is that ESG is as related to a big company's access to capital and access to talent and access to customers. So if the ecosystem around which these large companies work is putting pressure on all sectors to decarbonize, and they're watching the progress and they're measuring the progress. And as a C-level executive in a large company, and one of my customers said to me recently, if we don't perform at the top of our peer group in ESG, we cannot attract the best and brightest minds to come work in our company, period. And our people are our assets. So there's some very, very significant linkages between ESG today and environmental performance, sustainability performance, and business competitive. So I'll add those thoughts, and I'm sure we'll come back to some of them.
Absolutely. So Molly, before I ask you to comment on that, I know you're with E8 Angels in the US, but not everybody reads the website. So maybe you could introduce yourself and E8 Angels, and then sort of see if there's anything you'd like to add to what Vivian and Jonathan said.
Yes, E8 Angels is an angel investment group that invests specifically in clean technology deals. We've been doing this since 2006, so we've been at it for a long time compared to a lot of the newer funds. We are raising a fund. You'll hear from Jean-Noel Poirier later today. And we have a philanthropic fund that has RFPs each summer. This summer it's going to be agriculture related, and that's the Decarbonate US Fund. We've got about 125 member families at present. We interpret clean technology quite broadly. So across lots of sectors, it's not just electrification and hydrogen. It's very broad. I am the deal screening chair for that group
Super.
at present. So I would like to add a few comments, one of which may be more specific to the US. Our new US president has on his agenda a focus on clean technology. Well, it's translated into some infrastructure money for clean tech. It's also translated into engagement with companies, trying to encourage them to move towards clean technology, and a lot of visibility on the climate tech, clean tech area that may be helping some. I think that investment firms, both public and private, are getting pressure from their investors to evaluate how clean tech and the clean tech and ESG aspects of the companies. I think that's become quite a bit more mainstream to expect that level of evaluation. We've had some very successful companies like Tesla, which made EVs normal and readily available, and has had substantially accelerating sales year over year. And the large legacy car companies have had to respond to that and produce product, seek to compete. And that is relatively new. That's just happened in the last, I know they've had product around for a long time, and there's still challenges to getting the sales channels to sell that product, but it's become more and more, we have to compete on those, in those areas. So I think part of it is the technology is ready for market in a lot of places, and not just EVs, but in a lot of diverse technology. I'll stop there.
Okay, great. Well, we've got a number of other questions. One of the things is that a lot of our audience are angel investors. So what do angels need to consider when investing in clean tech? What are you seeing, and are there examples that would be important for the audience we have here? Wonder who'd like to go first with that one?
I'd be happy to start.
Yeah.
First, you need to have a viable business case, just like any angel investment. And if you don't have a viable business case, if the company hasn't studied their market, understood who their buyers are, proved that their business model is going to work, thought about manufacturing, scaling, exits, all the normal things that angel investment groups do, then it's really not going to have the impact that you would want it to have, that clean tech angels would like them to have. If you can't scale, if you can't sell, you won't have an impact. So that is number one. You need to have a viable business case. You need to do all the things that angel investments are supposed to do. In addition, climate-focused and clean tech-focused angels would like to understand that what they're doing will have a significant impact as the company scales. And therefore, they do look at what that impact is going to be. And if it's just sort of minor, there's a lot of greenwashing going on right now, saying that, oh, we've discovered that we are green after all, even if we haven't changed anything, and we do care. at least the people in my group care a lot that it will have an impact and a significant impact. But it's not a philanthropy. It's just investing, clean tech investing. You will hear people talking about clean tech investing taking a long time to get results from your investments. It depends on what there are a few barriers to quick returns. And one of them may be if there's a lot of hardware development and manufacturing and new science that has to be sorted out, but it's not just hardware. There's a certain level of defining a new product categories that have to be accepted in many cases. We have a company called Storm Sensor that was developing ways of monitoring what was happening in the water, in the entire wastewater streams and sewage streams in cities. And that's really relevant as the seawater rises, among other things. And they would have an online real-time map of what was happening there with inexpensive sensors. But that's a new product category. And you have to convince cities and municipalities that they need that. And the founder of that company started as a consultant in that industry. So she really knew the industry. And she's been successful at scaling in that industry quite a bit. But whenever you develop a new product category, it might take longer because people are not used to buying that product.
Okay, great, thank you. Additions from Vivian or Jonathan in terms of what angels should be considering.
It's okay, John, I'll jump in. I echo a lot of what Molly said, I think around, around the time it takes. I think it's still really important to keep in mind that horizon, does take time for that commercialization and that scale up. Even though we're seeing a lot of companies use enabling technologies like 3D printing for prototyping, machine learning or advanced computing, synthetic biology, I've heard be,
Uh-oh. I think Vivian just froze. Jonathan, would you like to take over?
Sure, I can add some things while Vivian's coming back on.
From a competitive perspective, these companies do still want to build up that IP moat and that competitive advantage moat, and so that takes time.
Oh, there it is again. Okay, Jonathan, I think if you could go now, that'd be great.
I think for angel investors, I really do think it is important in clean tech to be really aware of the scale of capital required to actually get to revenue and scale revenue. I think that's and so there are still a lot of hardware companies out there in clean tech. Reactors, hardware systems that require a lot of runtime in order to validate durability and validate performance and cost over the lifespan of what they're selling. But to Molly's point, there's also there's new softwares, there's new software technologies that are efficiency driven. There are sensor technologies. Some of these technologies can be much faster to market with and be much more capital light. So I think the capital intensity is important. I think also the business model evolution and the markets that people are selling into. For example, if you're selling into the municipal market, those are long, typically long sales cycles. If you're selling into the industrial market, they can be different. So I think path to market, business model, all really important considerations. Because if it takes, and typically clean tech has taken longer and been required more capital. And if you're an angel investor, you really got to be thoughtful about the impact to dilution and how many rounds of capital you're going to need to go through in order to get to a liquidity event. So all great points. I think I'm just amplifying.
So Vivian, great to see you back. It's nice of you to return. So rather than stay on this one topic, looking at time, I might move on to another question. And I'm going to ask Jeff Hansen, my partner, to join us really briefly for this one. And in the investment progression, it normally has been angels, then venture capitalists, but Jeff suggested that we could cut Vivian and BDC out of the deal here. And we could go angels, then to a strategic investor, such as a corporate, and maybe a partnership with a government agency like SDTC. Jeff, do you want to add to that if you're there, or does somebody want to react to that one?
Well, my comment, David, I wasn't throwing VCs under the bus because, as you know, I used to be one, but is that there's more alternatives available for capital, and people mentioned that ESG aspect in terms of corporate mandates to adopt technology, but it's also that it's driving a lot of their corporate venture investing, that and particularly in some more of the fossil fuel ecosystem, in order to meet their requirements to show initiatives towards ESG, they're having to make strategic investments in clean tech companies.
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in here. I certainly wouldn't recommend cutting Vivian out of the deal. She's in my deal, and so that would be a
Jeff
terrible.
wouldn't do that.
BDC does it. I'd say it whether you're in the room or not. But I think to your point, in clean tech compared to perhaps even 5 to 10 years ago, there is a lot more diversity in terms of the availability of capital. So there are lots of funds around that are where the LPs are large strategics. There's strategic direct investments. There's also quite an interest from family offices that are focused specifically on sustainability technologies, as well as pure play venture funds, and then some of the public sector funds like BDC and EDC. And SDTC and SIF. And so I think, in terms of thinking about how you capitalize, how you raise the capital for your company, in a clean tech company, you're going to consider all sources. Just a word about strategics. I've got a real bias to you got to be very careful taking money from a strategic, and really know the role that the strategic is going to play in your market, so you don't look like you've actually sold the company. And we've seen some examples of that very recently, where a very promising clean tech company will have a disproportionate amount of their equity owned by a strategic, and that dampens the enthusiasm of other companies to look at buying, because a lot of clean tech companies are sold through M&A. So you've got to be careful in terms of how you pick your strategic. Are they a channel to market? Are they a customer? Are they a prospective acquirer? Where do they fit in the ecosystem? So there's a few thoughts for you.
Yeah, I would just jump in and echo a lot of that. Often when we look at whether a strategic is already on the cap table or coming into the cap table, it's exactly the why. What is driving their investment into the company. We like the ones that have also the financial return interest, and to everything John just laid out, there's there are other objectives sometimes with strategics. So, and again, another point, John made that I'll just reemphasize too, is just around this syndicate of investors. There are more, and when we look at a round, we like it when it's a nice diverse round of VCs and some family offices, and we've seen some really strong family offices in the clean tech space that write very with big checkbooks and have meaningful value to bring to the companies too. So
I'd like to add to what Jonathan was saying, which is that we have had some of our companies tell us that they have turned down exit opportunities because people who were trying to acquire them were trying to take away the clean tech competitor to their legacy technology. And so you have to be very careful as you decide whether to exit to a particular company to understand whether that company is trying to add to their clean tech bona fides or whether they're trying to protect the legacy technology approach.
Yeah, great. Dave, one final comment. I'm getting a lot of feedback. Can you hear me? Okay. One final comment. Because governments have such a strong mandate to keep decarbonize, there is a lot of capital in public market, in the public sector for clean tech. So to me, it's not a question of either or. You know, in our company, we've got a very diverse set of shareholders that include family offices, pure play venture funds, strategics, and then we've also leveraged that with some of the public money that's non-dilutive from SDTC, from other sources, from BDC, that have been great partners for us as well. So it's about creating a financial strategy that uses and leverages the best of all the resources out there that are available. And the good news is that there's just a tremendous diversity of capital, and picking your way through and getting some help to figure out how to design that is really the trick shot. Really the trick shot.
So we got about 10 minutes left. So I'd like to ask one more question and then take questions from Q&A if everybody doesn't mind. So just want to change tactics a little bit. I was talking to Wal Van Leeuwen from Chrysalix Technologies just the other day, and he said that if we build more batteries, we're going to need massive amounts of minerals, copper, you name it, and lithium. We're going to need all sorts of different types of materials. So we're going to have to do more mining, using more energy and more water. Jonathan, you and I talked a bit about this before. Is this a big concern, or is this something that's, as we change everything, it's going to happen?
I think that the best way to think about it is that decarbonizing all of these different value chains and is going to require the creation and recreation of a whole number of different industrial value chains. There's really no question about it. And probably one of the most stark examples of that is really the electric vehicle value chain. I mean, it's just completely different from the conventional, combustion engine value chain that we're used to. And there will need to be a tremendous amount of, we know how to mine lithium, but we don't do it very well. And so there's going to need to be a tremendous amount of innovation in how we create and improve and make more efficient that lithium value chain, so that the creation of all these batteries we need doesn't create some colossal environmental sustainability problem, which it has the potential to do. And that goes for all the other metals required. But I think the same is true across other value chains. The solar sector has struggled with materials. As we start scaling up carbon capture, Svante is one of the leading point of use carbon capture companies in the world. They're based here in Vancouver. They just opened a 140,000 square foot manufacturing facility in Burnaby. That's big enough for Svante to build 10 carbon capture plants. We need thousands, and their materials are going to come from BASF. So there's just, Dave, there's going to be a need for this rebuilding of industrial value chains. It's going to create an incredible opportunity, and that's one of the things that McKinsey's pointed out, is that the scale of capital investment in infrastructure, industrial infrastructure, is going to need to be 3 to 4 times what we're typically used to historically going forward in order to decarbonize. So I'll leave you with that.
Molly, could you add to that?
I would add that once you build a battery, you use it over and over and over again for many, many years and decades. So it's not like we're constantly pumping oil out of the ground and using it up and then pumping more oil and using it up. Yes, you need to create these technologies once, for each battery, but they get used for a long, long time. So it's not quite as bad as it may seem. The other thing is that there's a lot of pressure as, in the early technology development, we might be creating technology that requires rare earth metals, but they're not necessarily necessary. Tesla, for instance, recently switched to battery technology that avoided a rare earth metal because they could, and because it's not to their advantage to spend a lot of money working on getting that requires them to take a metal that's difficult to get. And so the further we go along, I think the more we'll have alternative technologies that don't require some of these difficult minerals.
Great point.
Yeah, Vivian, anything to add?
Yeah, I think that's it. We're seeing, I think the short answer is sure, yes. But the long answer is that we're seeing very different and more sustainable approaches to a lot of these traditional industries. We're seeing a lot of crossover even into the deep tech territory, of how mining is done, how extraction is done. The lithium industry, in Canada, we have companies like Summit Nanotech, who's doing direct lithium extraction in a way that's, to minimize the impact as much as possible. We're invested in a company here in Vancouver, Mangrove Lithium, that is redefining the way that the lithium processing and refining is done and where it's done. And so I think there is going to be, yes, more, but there's also going to be a smarter way of doing it, and a more sustainable way of doing it. And alternative battery chemistries is another one. I've been sort of reading a little bit about what sodium sulfur is supposed to do in the battery world. And then you extend and think beyond that. There's thoughts about what second life batteries, once they're done the 8 to 10 year lifetime in a vehicle. What are OEMs going to do about that when they take them back? How are they going to kind of create a circular economy around that? And then there's also the recycling technologies that are developing around that. Li-Cycle is a Canadian company that benefited through the SPAC market last year, and was able to go public and is building its a spoke and hub model where they're going to build a large recycling facility in Rochester, New York. So I think we're seeing smarter and better ways of doing things. I think we've learned. I think we're learning from the past of how to do things, and in the lithium sector and in the EV sector, EV battery sector, I think we're going to see this play out. And just one really, I don't know if this might be of interest for people, but the question around the EVs and that carbon and the life cycle piece of it that Molly was talking about, the Argonne National Lab just released a model in which you can kind of put in some variables, the type of car, the type of battery and things, and they actually will kind of derive how long it'll take you in miles, because it's in the States, to sort of reach a break-even point with internal combustion engine vehicles. So if anybody is driving an EV and was curious, go check out. It's called the GREET model, GREET, from the Argonne National Lab down in the States. So
Super.
I've sent it over to my husband to plug in the info of our Kona Electric to see if we've gotten there yet.
Alrighty, have you got your money back? We got
Yes.
one quick question in the chat from Adam saying, what level of activity has been recently observed around remediating the soil health crisis? Am I correct? This might be about phosphorus, or is it about something else? Anybody want to comment on that one, Molly?
I can say that we've been seeing deals come through that are about improving the soil biome. There's an entire set of life that is there in the soil, in healthy soil, that helps the plants absorb the nutrients And so we've seen a number of startups come through that are talking about additives to soil that will improve the biome. I heard a talk not long ago from a university professor who was talking about how soil becomes saline over time, especially if you put a lot of irrigation, and that's a big problem in lots of parts of the world, and how they were growing new species of plants that had, or growing plants that extracted the salt from the soil. I haven't seen startups around that yet, but we've also seen companies come through that have things probes that you stick in the ground that absorb some contaminants from the soil.
Mhm. Great, okay. So we got about 5 minutes left. And just wanted to go to each one of our panelists and ask if you've got a closing comment or a suggestion for an angel or for an early stage company that's in this space about something you think would be really important for them to understand now versus 5 years ago. What's really different? Everybody's looking at the ceiling. I don't know. That's not good.
I was gonna say that as in all industry, you probably want your companies to be thinking about what mixture of raises they need. What do they need to raise equity for? What do they need to raise loans for? And revenue-based financing of various sorts has become a topic in the angel groups down here, some of them. And I recently attended a lecture from DOE and heard from the loan program. There's a loan program office in the US that helps companies that need to be able to commercially borrow money get to the point that they're bankable. Their technology is bankable, as in that you can do commercial borrowing. And they helped Tesla in the early days, I understand. So there's a lot of different aspects to successfully starting up your company. And it's not all angel investing. It's a mixture, it's a combination of different types of financing, and thinking through that at some stages, at the appropriate stage is good.
Vivian?
Yeah, I would put a particular Canadian angle on it, just to say that, you know, Canada is a clean tech leader. We, as they say, punch above our weight class. You know, last Clean Tech 100 list that came out, 13 of the companies on the list were Canadian. And so for kind of, you look at our size of, you know, the population size and whatnot, I think that's pretty, it's an achievement, which goes to say that that's an ecosystem, right? We're building an ecosystem here, not just in Vancouver and BC, it's across Canada. And we are benefiting from a supportive regulatory system and political environment right now. And so there are a lot of dots to connect. And the best way is to reach out and talk to people, to champions and leaders like John, to angel and fund groups like Molly, to our team, BC Capital, that kind of sits in this kind of one side on the public and one side on the private side. So there's a lot of dots to connect and to make your business or your investment succeed.
Jonathan?
Yeah, I think I'm gonna just riff off of Vivian's here. She got the commercial in here for the clean tech ecosystem really well. If you're an angel investor and you're thinking about clean tech investors, we can't be a global leader in software. We got a great software industry in Canada, nor can we be a global leader in some of the other great tech sectors we have. But we really are a leader, a global leader. And if you're investing as an angel in a clean tech company, chances are that there are other clean tech companies and there's expertise that is doing something that is complementary to the markets that you're going into, whether it's mining or oil and gas or heavy industry or carbon capture or water. And you know, these can be Cleantech can be capital intensive. It can take a long time. Sales cycles can be a long time. So there's a lot of experience now that we have in building these companies and figuring out the business models of how to quickly get to scale. So to Vivian's point, it's a very collaborative sector. Reach out, and there's lots and lots of people and experience to connect with.
Super. And
I would love to say that one of the advantages for a startup to pitch to angels is that they get lots of good questions, and it helps them figure out what questions are good to ask and where they need to find answers. Planning early.
Great, thank you very much. So it's almost 4, and Alzo told me that if I didn't give the microphone back at 4, she'd unfriend me on Facebook. So what I'd like to do is I'd really like to thank all our panelists. There's some great questions in the chat. Our apologies for not getting to all of them, but in any case, it's now time to go and hear from the companies that are pitching for money. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much, Dave, Molly, Vivian, and John. It was absolutely great to hear all the perspectives. And yes, there are some really great questions in the chat. So if I could ask your indulgence to answer them, you know, in the chat, if you're able to, that would be awesome.